Hey guys, what's up? This is Pauper TCG here, bringing you another deck profile and the first Magic the Gathering video of the channel. This will be my standard red-black vampires deck. This is an extremely budget and a very fun and actually a very powerful contender in the format deck for you guys to get into. It's about $60 to $80, give or take, what kind of text you make to your personal build, but around there, unless you decide to run Kalidas. I don't run Kalidas in this because I don't think it's needed main deck, and also because it is very expensive, and I don't want to drop that kind of money on a card of that nature. Also, later on, I will probably do a update of this deck, but for the Frontier format, sometime after this deck rotates out. Because Frontier is a great format, and I'll probably do a video on my thoughts on Frontier for the budget-minded player and for the new Magic player at some point. But just know that I do enjoy myself some Frontier. Anyway, without further ado, here is my red-black standard vampires. So we are going to start off with 4 copies of this one drop. It is Falkenrath Gorger, 2/1, already okay at there, and it gives all vampires in hand or on board Madness, which is awesome. And their Madness cost is their converted mana cost, so it's just an all-around good card. It enables you to use any vampire for Madness, so it's just fabulous. Here is the first of our cards that trigger Madness. This is Furyblade Vampire. It's a 2-cost 1/2 with Trample, and at the beginning of combat, during your turn, you can discard a card and have him gain 3/1 till the end of the turn. It's a great card, activates your Madness, and hits hard. That's what it's there for, so for that. Next up, we have our flip card. We have 4 off of Heir of Falkenrath. It's a 2/1, 2-cost black card that has discard a card, transform it. So it turns on Madness, and then it becomes a 3/2 flyer, which is just great. There's not a whole lot of flying in the standard format, and there's not a whole lot of reach in the standard format. So that gives this deck a very big advantage because of the flyers that it does run. So 4 of that. Next up, we have 3 copies of Stromkirk Condemned. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that has the ability discard a card, and vampires you control get 1/1 to the end of the turn. You can only activate the ability once per turn, though. This is a great card. It just throws more damage on the board and activates your Madness. It's awesome. Oh, and for those of you who don't know what Madness is, basically a card with Madness, if it's discarded, you can pay the Madness cost to play that card. To use the ability, or if it's a creature, put it on board. It's pretty sweet. It allows you to take advantage of really great cards that require discard outlets that you wouldn't normally run. So next up, we have 2 copies of Drana, Liberator of Malakir. She's a great card. She's not a card with Madness or a card that activates your Madness, but she's just a great vampire. She is flying in first strike. She's a 2/3, 3-cost. That already makes her good. But then on top of that, whenever she deals combat damage to a player, you can put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature you control. It just buffs up your vampires. Very solid card, and it's a vampire itself, so Falkenrath's on the board. It has Madness. It's pretty sweet. Then 2 of this Stromkirk Occultist. It's a 3-drop with Trample. Clearly I have 4-1s. That's all I could scrounge up. They were a little hard to find for some reason for me at my local shop. But anyway, it's a 3/2 with Trample, and it has the ability when it attacks, you can exile the top card of your deck, and if you do, during your next turn, you can play that card as if it were in your hand. So it's essentially an extra draw, essentially. Not exactly, but essentially. And it's also got Madness for its own cost. So that's pretty sweet. Or sorry, for 2. Madness for 2. So that is pretty awesome. Next up, another card that discards for you, and it's a vampire. Olivia, Mobilized for War. She's a 3/3 flying legendary creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can discard a card, and if you do, put a 1/1 counter and give that creature haste on the creature. And it becomes a vampire in addition to its types. It just gives you more discard outlets, gives haste, 1/1 counters, and it's a 3/3 flyer. All in all, it's just a fabulous card, perfect for this style of a deck. And then the last creature that I run is 2 of Bloodhole Priest. This is a great card. It's a 4-cost 4/4. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, if you have no cards in hand, which in a deck where you're discarding a ton, which this would be it, you get to a point where you generally don't have cards in hand all the time. But whenever that you attack or put this card on the board, if you have no cards in hand, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player, which is just great. You can pop a weaker creature. You can do that last bit of damage you need to a creature. You can just burn the crap out of your opponent. It's awesome. And then it's got Madness for 3, which is great. It's always good. So that is the creature lineup. Lots of creatures, because obviously this is a heavy aggro deck, so you want a lot of creatures to deal a lot of damage. Next up, we have our spells. 4 of this instant Fiery Temper. It's deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Lightning Bolt ability, but it's a 3-cost. Here's the thing. It's got Madness that turns it into a 1-cost. So in a way, this is essentially your Lightning Bolt of the deck. It's fantastic. If you don't have a discard outlet, you can cast it for 3 if you need to, but generally you'll have a discard outlet and you can just use the discard outlet. It's a great card. So 4 of that. Next up, 4 of Distemper the Blood. It's a 2-cost sorcery. You can give target creature 2/2 and trample to the end of the turn, and it's got Madness, makes it a 1-cost. This is great because it allows you to get that extra push you may need, or defend yourself, because if you can activate a discard ability on your opponent's turn, you can essentially play this card like an instant. So, it's very versatile, puts a lot of damage on the board. It's a great card. Next up, here is your essential board wipe. If you have a lot of mana, this card gets better with more mana, but essentially this is your board wipe. Avacyn's Judgment. 2-cost, you can deal 2 damage divided among as many cards as you choose to target creature and or player. And if you pay its Madness cost, which is 1 fire and then X, you can burn X to between any number of creatures and or players. It's a great card. You can use it to sack boards. You can use it to just end the game. All in all, great. And then the last card I have, this is not a Madness card, but it is a discard outlet. It's 1-cost Lightning Axe. Discard a card in addition to the cost, or pay 5. You'll discard every time, basically. And then deal 5 damage to target creature. It's just straight up creature removal. It's a great card. There's a clear argument to run 3. I can see where a lot of people would want to run 3 of this, just because it's such a great removal card in this day and age of Standard, because generally you're not seeing a lot of huge creatures unless you're facing Eldrazi. And then last up we have the land base. It's pretty standard for black-red. 4 Foreboding Ruins. Comes into play tapped unless you reveal swamp or mountain. 4 Smoldering Marsh. Yet again, another dual land. It is a swamp and mountain, and it comes into play untapped if you control 2 or more basic lands. pretty sweet. And those are your 8 dual lands. And then you will also be running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 mountains. You run a fairly even spread of black to red in this deck, so you want quite a bit of both. But red is slightly more important, which is why I put the extra land in, because there are 7 swamps in my build as well. Yeah, 8 mountains, 7 swamps. Well, there you have it, guys. That is my black-red budget vampire deck. Like I said, you can build this deck for around $60 for this build, and some builds can range up to the $100-ish range. Usually not too much higher than that, unless you're throwing in, like, planeswalkers and, like, doing ridiculous stuff with that. But this is one of those decks that I don't really feel needs a planeswalker. There really isn't a planeswalker that just shouts, run it in this deck, you know? It's very good on its own. And obviously there is also some builds for this deck that get really cheap. I've seen this deck built for $15. Just dropping a few cards that I run, like the legendary creatures and stuff like that, which are more expensive, and the dual lands. But anyway, that is the build. I hope you all enjoyed. Please rate, comment, and subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic and Vice Schwartz videos, and more. This is Pauper TCG signing off.